the December meeting of the Commission for Museums and Cultural Arts. Please come to order.
And I'll take the roll call. Commissioner Evans,
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Here.
Commissioner Wotowski,
Here.
Commissioner Thomas,
Here.
Commissioner Kimsey, and Chair Sovereign,
Here.
and Commissioner Champion is absent today.
We'd like to start by asking for approval of the consent agenda.
I so move. Second.
Hearing no opposition, we declare that accept. Are there public comments of general? Was that the minutes? I was not on the agenda.
There are no public comments, Chair Sovereign. Although I will share for anyone viewing that information on participating in today's meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is on this meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org.
Approval of the minutes. I'm sorry, I skipped.
Yeah, there
You
was
did-
one question on the minute.
Yes, the next meeting, these are the minutes from October. The next to the last paragraph says next meeting will be February 6th, which from October is not correct. It was today, just a typo.
Thank you.
I believe that we are also agreed to not meet in January because of the closeness to the end of the year and the absence of several members of the commission.
So clarification, you're proposing that we not meet in January.
Yes.
Okay.
And I can, Chair Sovereign, I'll just mention this also for Commissioner O'Neill. On the bottom of page 2, the next meeting there, it's scheduled, the next scheduled meeting is February 6, 2025. So you are correct in terms of it just being just a small error, but that's on the agenda for today. The next meeting will be February 6th. Yeah.
There's a item number 2 is discuss options for the Lexo Nino cross at the Lower Presidio Park. And I suspect that there is a plan for some discussion from the director.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just a background on this. There's some background in your agenda reports, but the Alejo Nino cross has been sitting on top of the Lower Presidio Historic Park. The cross, the initial burial site of Alejo Nino, he's the first person of record on the Book of the Dead, which is the Book of the Dead is in the possession of the Diocese of Monterey. They have the original Book of the Dead from Father Sarah. And it mentions that that's where the piece in the history about him coming on the ship with Father Sarah, and Sarah writes about it as well, is that during the day prior to them landing, he was the caulker on the ship that he passed, and they held a ceremony for him at the cross. And then when they landed on June 3rd, 1770. So at the time, initially his burial site would not be up on the top of the hill where you see kind of where the cross has been placed now. It would have been closer to where the granite cross is, because they buried him near the foot of the tree, the oak tree, which has now been replaced by the granite cross. But during the creation of the tunnel to go to Lighthouse, the marker was moved up on the hillside. The thought was it was closer over there. But recently I got a call that the memorial, the marker was damaged, and it looks like either somebody had pushed it over or it had fallen out in the dirt through the soil there. I looked inside of that. I went up there to inspect it, and it was sitting loosely, like rocking back and forth. So I've put it in storage as of right now, just because it was not safe to be where it was at the time. But this is adjacent to the Father Sarah statue, the granite statue that was provided by Jane Stanford. And so that's a very archaeologically sensitive area. And for folks that worked on the project, on the pathways or the signs and road signs along the interpretive plan over the past several years with Old Monterey Foundation, City of Monterey, that site, we would not be doing digging in terms of relocating that same post. So with that, there's a couple of thoughts that I have on there, which is one, is this the right place for the memorial? Because the memorial is actually closer towards was essentially California State Parks. The piece of land that's at the end of Pacific Street is actually California State Parks land. And then there's, private, is that private Bolio or artillery? I'm always mixing those two up. But the road going up, and then there's the Presidio. And so the cross is put up there on the Presidio, but really it should be near the Father Sarah cross. And either way, because this is a historic marker and it was done 200 years after his passing, they put in the marker up there. And it looked to me kind of like fence posts. So I don't think it looks historic in terms of what would have been done at the landing at the site at that time. But I feel that anything done there needs to be done by Secretary of Interior standards for historic sites, which is either preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, or reconstruction. And because it's part of the interpretation plan and on the maps with the signage there with, that Old Monterey Foundation, the City of Monterey put on there, we've got the maps on there on the wayfinding of that. The memorial is there, and the interpretive panel for Father Sarah is right behind you, is the memorial site for Alejo Nino. So there's some thoughts of like, do we recreate it there with a surface mount base in terms of like a, one thought that I've had there is that marker could be surface mount the same ways as the road signs. The road signs at the lower Presidio around the curve are surface mount with like a weighted base. And you do like a weighted base, but then surround the weighted base either with like a granite Carmel stone or abalone, something on there that would represent the area with a cross that would be in there, either on the same spot or working with California State Parks to be closer towards the initial burial site. But as I mentioned, I don't think that putting it in there and digging into that site, because it's archaeologically sensitive, and we would have to work with the archaeologists right now to bring somebody out on that site. And I have notified the U.S. Army that it's been pulled out for now, and that we'll think of a solution and talk with them more in the future. So just wanted to bring it to your attention. We do not have funding right now to do any changes or installation, but would like to hear any feedback or questions or comments.
Yeah, and the comment I would make is that the California State Parks, it's a difficult site to get to. There's no parking there. There's nothing. The Old Monterey Foundation and the city have spent a lot of money putting in that harbor walkway there, as you mentioned, Brian. So I think somewhere there that the Army and the city and the Native Americans can all approve. But I do think it should be something that people see. It's a famous site that it's been referred to for a long, long time.
Yeah. I think it's going to need interpretation. Just having the cross there is, sort of, so what? Who was this guy?
And that's where the interpretive panel that's next to it does have it. So the Father Sarah panel that's right there next to the Stanford Memorial does have it. And it's all currently on our path, our information path, all of that, we have it already on there. So it's all, I mean, right now it's existing in terms of there's a small piece about who he was, at least from what we know, that's on that interpretive panel right there,
Oh.
next to where the current site is. And that's where I'm saying the options are, is it the right place? Number one, because that was moved there in 1970, 200 years after his passing, when they were tearing out the end of Pacific to make the
Well, as one who's given tours up there many times, I can tell you that it's confusing where it is. And if I had my vote, I would move it back down to where the park area, where it should be. And that's good, where you mentioned, that's probably where he was buried. And the bones are long gone now, but actually it got urban renewed when they did that tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's a good part to also discuss probably with California State Parks as well as a partner out there, just to see if their thoughts on it. And I hear what you're saying, Commissioner, with, regarding the pathway, because that's where I mentioned, like, the viewing and access and having it already on the interpretation plan and it on the maps and everything like that. So
I remember Old Monterey Foundation talked to the state parks. We wanted to put and have more of that area as a viewpoint. They were very, very reluctant to do anything in that area because it's right up above that, the homeless camp out all the time. And they thought that it would be a security problem and they would have to monitor it. So they were reluctant to have anything go into that area, even though, as Tim said, that's probably the best original spot. But I think you would have to talk to them. When we talked to them a couple of years ago, they were saying they didn't want to touch that area.
Okay.
This area is the area that's called Sloats Landing Park, right? The state. There's
the memorial. There's the Portola. There's a Portola monument there, and it's that little park, and you'll see like there's like tiny kind of like granite rocks right there, and then the big granite cross that has the iron fence right around it.
As you're going toward PG on Pacific Street, before you make the left turn onto the Presidio, it's that large area right there. And again, to the best of my knowledge, there's no parking either on Pacific or on the Presidio Road in that area.
No.
So the only people I've ever seen there are the homeless.
Well, I think people walking by there, and I haven't a lot, but I see tours there all the time.
Take people down there.
Yeah. I mean, it's the connecting point, as we've talked before, regarding, coming from First Theater. If you're going from First Theater and you're walking towards the Presidio, that is one way to walk towards it, where there's the connector of, where the oak was, this Viscaino and Sarah Oak was right there. So I think at this point, I wanted to alert the commissioners in terms of
That whole area, I mean, just like, one of the biggest question I always got when those tours, how come there's a Celtic cross there? So there should be some interpretive information why that it's Celtic, why it's there. Anything with the Sarah Creek, there should be an interpretive panel there to explain the importance of that little creek when it wasn't a little creek, and it was a big little river that ran through there. I mean, that should be really important.
Right. I mean, I've seen, the closest thing you'll see is on the recreation trail, which has the image of the original tree and the creek and everything, but that is not actually where you're at.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing just to work with California State Parks on in terms of like, if there's any availability of even doing something on the fence, because if they don't want to dig on that site, you could do something attached directly to the fence that has the cross was donated for this reason by, after the tree went down. Right. So, yeah. So I think my feeling on it is that if we were to go forward with it, one option is working with somebody who might be a woodworker that potentially there's different options out there, but let's say one would be parishioners at San Carlos Cathedral because they have a tie to being one of the first churches out here in the United States and for longest serving in the West Coast, and serving with original site of of Sarah and Presidio, that there's a lot of ties there in terms of that San Carlos Cathedral, with, I think, tying back all the way back to Alejo Nino. So seeing if anybody would work on making something, because I feel like it should look handmade. In my mind, it should look like somebody would have made it and not look like, because the one that was done there, if you see the photo on the packet, it's a pretty square, I think, pressure treated fence post with almost like a fence board that has been carved out with the name at that time. And I find like either it's a working with a company to make something that would look like wood, but would be made of something that's not possibly going to deteriorate so fast, because I feel like a regular wood, because the one that I didn't get a close photo, but it's full of moss. Like the one that we have right now, the letters, the names is really illegible because it's got so much rain and water soaked in over the years. Just like your fence at your house would, after 20, 30 years, is going to start deteriorating. So this has been 54 years. It's pretty worn down. So I don't think restoring that piece, that initial cross, is the best bet, my personal opinion. I feel that we should do something that would be a recreation of what we think may have been the style of that time, but have it not look modern. I just don't want it to look modern. That's what I mean by surface mount base, but it doesn't look like a plastic base or a granite or concrete. It would look like something around it that would be a burial site.
Would you like to have a subcommittee of the commission work on this, or?
I have a meeting. I think we're going to be bringing back more information on Lower Presidio Historic Park, coming forward. And I think, as a later time. So I think at this point, I just more kind of, I think, informational and discuss anything, and then bringing back when we start, like, as we talk later about issues that have been brought up with the city and city council, city manager, and everything, because this is a part of that interpretation and part of the importance of the park. And as we talk in the future, I think we would bring it back. And at that point, after I talk more with the city and come back to you guys, I think it would be great to have, if we have a Lower Presidio subcommittee or whatever that's going to be, that they also look at this topic too. But I think for right now, it's just a notice that it's not there. We're going to look at options if we want to think about it in the next couple months.
Has the relationship between the city and the Army regarding the Lower Presidio Park settled? I mean, that seemed to be up in the air recently, whether we're going to be evicted or.
I haven't taken part in any other parts on that. And I think I might have some of that in terms of my next agenda item. We can talk about that more on that. Let's talk about that more on the next agenda item.
Okay.
And I'll speak on that. But yeah, just say if you have any, let's discuss this we'll put it back on another agenda topic, and then we'll bring it up when we start talking more Lower Presidio at this point. But yeah, my feedback was just to get feedback and initial feedback on placement. Are we looking at the right place? And I think I appreciate the feedback on, in terms of the prior discussions on California state parks, because that leads me to having a couple other discussions with them to just say, this is where it's at right now, and let's figure out what we should do in the future. And then we'll come back to it.
I would also endorse this feeling that was expressed, I think, by Tim, that area is extremely historic. I mean, there's no place in our area, certainly, that is more historic than that little area. And our attempts at various times to set up, like Celtic Cross, a state park called Sloat's Landing, the treatment, of course, of the creek, that's all totally confusing, I think, to anybody coming in.
Mhm.
And we're not making as much use as we should of the historic nature of that area. So I encourage you to continue discussions with the state parks. Come
Will-
back to us when
Will do. Yeah,
we can do anything to help.
appreciate it.
Uh, Guess we're moving to,
You have to
Item-
take public input?
There's no
No.
public.
Nobody, okay.
I see, item 3 is appropriation of $10,000.
Yeah, so I'll speak on this one. This is up to, because I'm not sure how much items are going to be going up for auction of, but the background is that there's a private collector that bought a number of items from Ed Ricketts Jr. 25 plus years ago in terms of letters, documents, files. And these items are going to be going up in auction online and in person in Pasadena in February of 2025. As I mentioned in the document, the final list has not been approved. I mean, has not been posted, but there are some items which we already have in terms of photos, and we have some documents and we have some different similar documents. But there are original like thesis and writings from Ed Ricketts that he had personally written, some different poems. There's documents related to a lot of correspondence with Viking Press regarding the Sea of Cortez. There's documents between him and John Steinbeck. But a lot of these items, and I believe there's, just different, there's different essays, there's communications with Mexican government in terms of the traveling to and from Sea of Cortez. And some documents are like the statement of his, the books that he all lost in the fire. There's like a list that he wrote and like hand typed up and handwritten list of all the books and record collection and those kind of items in there. And these items are all going up for auction. And so we have an artifact acquisition fund right now. And so it's a matter of I am hoping that that we don't have to spend too much on there, of course, but I'm trying to get in contact with the private collector directly as well and just try to see if I can get people to donate items to the city or anything like that. But I was asking for up to $10,000 from the Museum Trust Fund directed towards artifact acquisitions to work on this in case items came up on there that were of interest to the kind of in further interpretation of the lab, because I feel like some of these items would be great for us to have to make sure they don't go on a private hand and then we never see them again. And if we're doing further exhibits in there, it'd be great just to have something in there in our displays out there in the basement.
Question.
Yeah.
What's the total of the current fund?
Right now it's at about, I'm going to say it's around $15,000. Not a huge amount. Our art acquisition fund is much higher. Our art acquisition funds are about, I think, $150,000 around right now, but the artifact is at 15,000. And
Okay.
I will say, I think that the acquisition fund has been funded in the past, either through specific donations as well as selling other items that did not belong really in the collection of the museums. So if there's items that we de-accession, that we auction off in our collection, we could auction off items that are no longer really valid in our collection and use those funds gained toward further use of our things. Because we have a number of items like artwork that's sitting in storage that's not in great care that I think would possibly be good for auctioning in the future, de-accessioning.
As a museum person, just to me, I think it's important the city has those artifacts that they don't go into a private collection. No one can use them and research them. So if they're here, then they'll be accessible to people. And I think that's extremely, yeah, I think we can do it.
I agree with Tim. And do we have to take public input or can we make a motion, Francesca?
There are no public.
I move approval of the director's requests.
Another question. Who actually will participate in the auction?
Well, I would probably have to have a representative, and I'm the one, myself or Francesca would be the two approved to make purchases for the city. So we would have to make those purchases. One of the two of us, I would believe.
Do we not have an artifact specialist on the staff now?
We do, but they don't have the purchasing. We don't have like a purchasing card for them and things like that. So I've talked with them about this kind of like in terms of the collection and what we have on there, but they're more in terms of the care and they're not in terms of the acquisition of materials at this time.
We don't know exactly what's coming up at this auction. Is that-
I have a draft, but it's not a public draft, but I can say things like, and I met with the auction house along with Sherry Flummerfelt from the Western Flyer Foundation. We met at the lab the other night and I looked at some of the documents and I will say some of them were related, for example, related to John and Carol on the Western Flyer. There's documents related to the correspondence between them trying to get access to Mexico. There's a full binder on correspondence between the publisher from Viking and back and forth regarding the photos and everything used for Sea of Cortez. There's original proofs of the books. There's original copies of different books that are on there. There's letters to Richie Lovejoy, and there's personal letters to different people that are in this collection as well. There's photos, there's etchings, prints that are up there, but yeah, I think this same auction is going to be the auction where they're most likely going to be auctioning off higher price items, which we do not have the funding for, which are Western Flyer artifacts, which is the original steering bridge. And can't remember whatever, Commissioner Thomas, do you remember what other items on there? Like I don't know if that's called the frog compass, the ship wheel and the compass, I think. And there's another, Fry family has a number of items that they pulled from the Western Flyer when it was called the Gemini, and they weren't aware that it was the Western Flyer, and they pulled this off the ship and upgraded some of the equipment. And so those items from the original ship are going up for auction. So on that same auction, but those are going to be, we expect to be a much higher price.
And I don't think we want to be,
Yeah.
we don't want to be bidding against the Western Flyer Association.
Yeah. So I think there are some things like, because we do already have in the California History Room, we do have documents related to the trip to Mexico, that they had sent to the Mexican government in terms of getting there. So I think there's some things like that, which I don't think we need additional items. I want to be very specific in terms of like what kind of items we're in here that are, that would really help tell. So it's, for example, here's one, is item 13. Ricketts shares ownership of lab with Steinbeck. 2 letters, carbons from Ed Ricketts addressed to John and J.O.N., because he's called mostly room as J.O.N. Steinbeck, with a December 31. Also included is a 1936 accounts receivable report from Pacific Biological Laboratories at the Pacific Grove location. 2 carbons of letters by Ed Ricketts to the soon-to-be vice president of Pacific Biological Laboratories, John Steinbeck. Ricketts provides the dope to date on the financial situation of the lab and the various legal and financial steps needed to bring Steinbeck in as part owner of Doc's Lab. In this transaction, Steinbeck would supplant Ricketts' father, Austin, as vice president of the company. So this is right after the fire. And this is one of the letters that, when we are doing historic interpretation, I think those kind of things are really important for telling those stories about how Steinbeck was connected to the lab as well. And that's where I find seeing those letters and having access to those really could be interesting to see, of the original notes and records from the Sea of Cortez trip as well, and seeing if there's anything that was of interest.
The reason for my question was we think this 10,000 is gonna cover all the things that we are interested in. Since we only have 15, if we
Mhm.
authorized more money just to ensure that we got the most valuable pieces for us, it may be a fair investment as opposed to limiting ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, on my side, I really don't know, like I've seen kind of like what the auction houses drafted as like a low and a high estimate, but we don't know how many people are going to be interested in it. And I feel like, we wouldn't want to get everything, of course, just because it's going to be so many different items. I think there's over, if I'm correct, I think over 60 items on the auction list of different letters. And I find that we would probably only need a couple different ones that are on there. And I think $10,000 to me is a little, just as kind of being financially prudent, because it's a pretty short window. Like if we had more time, I would, if I'd known a year ago or something like that, we would have tried to raise funds or do something like that. But this is a pretty recent awareness of mine. So I think this is a good amount for this specific kind of an auction, and then looking in the future at our collections and then coming back and saying, like, I do think we should look back at our collections in the future and see what do we have in our collections that needs to be deaccessioned over time, and is there value in that to really help replenish some of these funds.
Thank you.
At the beginning of the meeting, there was a subcommittee going on with regard to accessibility of the lab. There's a bunch of pieces coming that are still floating as far as I can see as to where are we going with the lab. It still bothers me that the only indication of what that is a statement of Pacific Biological Laboratory, which sounds like something that would attract drug addicts and people who could want to break in. That place is a sieve, as far as I can see. I think at some point soon, we ought to ask some group, including members, to take a look at what is the big picture of what we are trying to do with the lab and how we're going to get it done and when. So I guess that's it. Is the subcommittee on accessibility going to report today, or?
I'll talk a little bit more about that on on my director's report. But as of that, I mean, this is like, we are operating right now the lab on the vision of when we first bought the lab. The lab, in terms of like what it has been there for, and the purpose of the lab was to tell the stories of Ricketts and the men's club and those kind of activities. That was kind of the vision of why we found it important in telling that story. And so there's still some interpretation over there of the lab at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. They have a small display, and other places have it too. And I will say our tours, every time we do the second Saturday public tours, they pretty much always book out, and we have open hours and people come in there, and private tours are still successful as well. But long term, yes, we need a full interpretation plan, which would be an interpretation plan of what kind of stories do you tell, how do you tell, and how do you open the building up for a larger audience in there. Those are something that's larger to have. But I've never heard of anybody trying to say it was a drug site or anything like that. It's the first I've ever heard of anybody ever mentioning that. It was a site, tied with the Pacific Apparatus Company based out of Berkeley, and that's, with the Pacific Biological Laboratories. And so it's been known. We have people that I've been on there during the weekends, and people coming from Croatia. I've had people just stop by and say, I've read about this, I've learned about this, and coming in and just wanting to get a tour, and all kinds of people from around the country that know about it. So those people that know, they love that history. They love to come in there to see that site. And we have documents based on the Pacific Biological Laboratories over at the California History Room that were gifted to the California History Room in the library. And those are used by researchers quite often. And photos are used of the lab quite often by researchers too. So we still get a lot of requests for it. It's also such a historic building that we can't have it fully open like a lot of other museums would be out there.
Call for the question. We have a motion and a second.
And then any further
Who was the
discussion?
second? Did you second, Bob?
I would be happy to second it.
Okay.
Further discussion of the motion? All right, let's take a vote.
They say all in favor?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appears to be unanimous.
I'll give you guys an update when we find out more. All right, I can go into, if you like, chair into item 4, which is my director report. So starting off, we have a part-time seasonal, so this is an hourly employee to assist with special events in the Colton Hall Museum exhibits. His first name is Jacob, and he started just recently. We'll be bringing him on, and he will be working on this kind of coming calendar year on assisting with special events, as well as assisting on the exhibits inside the exhibit spaces inside of Colton Hall. So our plan is to have rotating exhibits there inside of Colton Hall. If you go in Colton Hall, I mean, it closes at 4:00. We're open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But as of right now, we have 15 Monterey Angels inside of Colton Hall as of right now, or 14 inside, I believe, and 1 outside. So you can see a lot of the Angels out there. But we're excited to bring on more people that are going to help us be able to do more here with the museums. The Emil Norman panels that previously were displayed in the Monterey Conference Center before the remodel are, there's an installation plan that I've seen. I don't have a full document. I've just seen the images of it, but it would be displayed on the first floor of the Stanton Center if you're familiar with the Stanton Center, when you walk in and go to the left, and there's a staircase, it'd be right by the staircase against the wall with a backlit panel, so that these endomosaic panels are great when you see them through the light. So they'll have a backlit panel out there, so you can see really all of the fauna, the glass, the shells, all of the different glass pieces in there. And the wood paneling will be reminiscent of Norman's home in Big Sur. And so the person working on the design is somebody I had connected with, and I mentioned this in a prior meeting, was was that? I think that was David Wessel. He actually worked with Emil Norman directly on the restoration of the endomosaic at the Masonic Lodge in San Francisco. So he is very well versed in terms of how to care for and treat these items. So we have a loan agreement out with the Stanton Center to display those panels, but we got them out of storage because they were stored inside of our garage, and I wanted to get them out on display once again. I think our list might be a little low. We have a little bit more than now, and we have over 60 Monterey Angels on display, or slated to be on display. They should be up by this week. And I've interested that this year we put out some of the 1973 editions again. So if you look at the one on front of Colton Hall porch, that's a 1973 edition. They look kind of 1970-ish, I would say. A lot of them have neon paint, bright colors, kind of a little bit more wild designs. Those ones are larger, so they've not been brought out in recent years, because they're closer to about 7 feet in height. and are thinner wood, so they don't do well on street panels. So we had those installed, the 1973 versions, on the outside, some on the outside of Stanton Center, some on the inside of Colton Hall, but also inside Stanton Center, because they're going to be a will call site for Christmas and the Adobes. And inside Colton Hall, we put 3 versions next to each other with the same instrument. So the 1956, a 1973, and a 1999, just so that you can see the 3 different styles, that because they're all done by the same artist. So you can see the progression of the 3 on there. But the list here, you'll see that we've hung a lot more, and I'm very happy to see more out there in the community. And there's an article today in the weekly about the angels, because we had 12 replicas made, and I'm having those hung on the higher street posts just for, they're more secure. They're going to hold up much better in the weather. A lot of them have really been damaged over time. So long term, we'll try to come up with a plan, but I'm hoping that this helps build more awareness of the angels out in the community this year. And we had, speaking on the Lower Presidio Park, as I know many of our commissioners were there and spoke at the meeting. That was a meeting with City Manager Hans Uslar, Assistant City Manager Nat Rojana Sathira, and the Public Works Director Andrea Rennie, and myself. And I appreciate you voicing your opinions on the Lower Presidio Park and your the importance of it.
I think that what was great about that meeting was that even though it was a study session, every council member advocated that the city retain the park and keep it open for public access. They made no decision, and I think Hans said it's going to come back in January, but every council member was very, very supportive of it.
Yeah, and I think it's the, different, as you heard, there are different council members have had different personal experiences with it as well, which was important. But we look to bring some of this back probably early 2025 Museums Commission. I have to talk more with Hans and the team on that. But back to the point of, in the question regarding the military, I haven't had any further meetings from the military directly at the military command level. I know we do have a new commander there. But on the side, they know of the historic importance, because I've had some calls with them in terms of soil erosion and collection and that kind of thing. And we're on the same page. And the person that was writing the grant for the potential retaining wall or erosion solution, I haven't seen what those solutions are, but that was what the Army was working on. And that person has moved on to new opportunities. So I'm not sure where the Army lands right now in terms of where their priority was with a retaining wall or solutions like plants that might be help with erosion on the side, or any kind of other pieces that are on there. But it will be good to have further meetings and those discussions. But as during that meeting, some of the comments from council were regarding having a survey on Have Your Say Monterey, or possibly one of my thoughts was having commissioners out in the community, like if we had tabling, because there was a lot of how many people are aware of this park, how many people, just having those initial surveys of how many people have gone to the park. But we'll be having discussions with the city manager's office as we talked with council, then coming back to the commissions. But I found, as Commissioner Wachowski, as you mentioned, that by and large, the council as a whole really felt it was important, and for us to kind of come back with a plan on engagement. And that was their piece, was that engaging the different stakeholders, the Army directly, whether that's Parks and Recreation and Museums Commission and different folks up out there, that there's so much historical importance, and California State Parks. Everybody needs to be engaged in this discussion about what do we go forward. And then, we did hold an event, a press conference with Don Addis, and a number of elected officials were there at Colton Hall. I felt that was a good spot to film for them to host an event over there. The PBL accessibility options, the Architectural Resources Group, also known as ARG, provided 3 accessibility options for
You may show Renee. Tim, you may show you. That's mine.
And these would include like having a ramp or a ramp or a lift to go access on the to the backside of the building. And we are just at this point on kind of concept phase. We're going to come back with them with any kind of cost estimates. But as we talked, as our subcommittee talked, basically was that a couple of things was that we do not want anything that would harm, destroy, change anything with the physical structure, the location. The staircase is not historic, but the building is. And so the staircase could be replaced in terms of how do we do that with with a lift, with stairs, having it, and also we need an accessible restroom. So the other thing was to have the accessible restroom outdoors and having it look kind of like a facade of a building, but not change the restroom upstairs, not bring in, because that would actually either bring into the men's club, it would actually expand out into the bar area, or would have to expand into the kitchen area too, which would lead to a lot of construction changes as well. And so we were all in agreement of that, and not to do anything that would harm the tanks out in the back as well. So we're going to come back and look at some cost estimates and talk with the partners, and then see what the next steps are about planning, coastal commission, all these other pieces that need to go into place about with that. And then we had our 1849 California Constitution Convention reenactment on October 13th. That was the 175th anniversary to the date of the original signing. And we had 2 showings on that date from that. I believe it was.
That's a really great show. And we, unfortunately, we're restricted in how many people can get in there, but some point, if we could get a video or, some sort of permanent record, which could be displayed there on a regular basis.
Well, I took a video of it last year, or maybe the year before, but I've recorded it and it's on our city website. So we could stream, we could have access, but it is a longer video, but it is on, I recorded the reenactment. So we do have it.
And how are we making it available?
On YouTube. It's on YouTube. It has, it's on the city website. And then we have it linked on I believe it's linked on our museum's website too. So, but we do have I was there recording it about a year or 2 ago.
Very good.
Yeah. And then we had a city council study session, October 23rd, related to the expanded path of history and the public safety complex on the Dutra Street property, which is, I consider the Dutra, Pacific, and Madison Street, because of that property was essentially one parcel in the years back. And it wasn't just Dutra Street, it was Dutra, Madison, and Pacific that were all part of the development of that time. And I would say our council was interested in the museums partnering with Monterey and Chamber of Commerce to expand access to some of these, expanded path of history, the app, and other kind of services we had. So we will see how that goes. And I mentioned here, these are the Pacific Biological Laboratories is slated to display items from the original Western Flyer during the January 11th, 2025 public tours and open hours. So we have those tours, 2 tours in the morning, and then the open hours from 12 to 4. And we look at those items were going to be the steering wheel, the compass, and some of the original items from the Western Flyer will be on display for that day before they go to auction in February. And Brianna is our artifact specialist. She's been working on our city art inventory, cataloging and processing a lot of different collections that we have on basically in the queue. We have a lot of stuff that's sitting in our archives that just hasn't been accessioned yet. And then we're updating some of our display cases at the MST bus and trolley stop on Tyler and Franklin, in between the East and West Garage. It was Del Monte and Franklin, and then there's Tyler Street. There's 4 display cases, which I think have not been We updated the Colton Hall display like last year a little bit, but the other ones had not been updated in probably 20 plus years. So I got in contact with California State Parks and Monterey State Historic Parks because they had photos which had just been sun drenched and were old. And then the dates for Christmas in the Adobes are wrong. It says Thursdays and Fridays, Christmas in the Adobes annually. And it's got photos that look like they're from my childhood in there. And so the flags are just really washed out too. So I've contacted them about whether they want to do a new display on that site. But things like it says Monterey Peninsula Museum of Art, and that's now called Monterey Museum of Art. And the phone numbers for on one of the displays are all wrong. So there's a lot of incorrect information on these displays. So we're just going to take some of the stuff out because it's one of the major stops for the garage in terms of the trolley stop at different times of the year by summer too. And it makes more sense for us to just have some newer objects and displays in there. So happy to work with any commissioners that may want to work on some of that stuff in the future. And as you see here, the Rotary Club decorated Colton Hall for 19th year again. And and our parks team and our staff, and thank you, Francesca, for being there with them on that of setting up all the displays on the outside and making the wreaths and different things out there. So those are my report on things, activities, and happy to answer any questions.
You've been busy.
A little bit. This is my museum activities. We're all busy here.
Rumor of possible assistant director of the library to help you with all this business. Is that coming about?
That is currently in the queue with our city human resources department. So I'm waiting for their timeline. It's up to them. But it was funded this year and I've done all the paperwork I needed on my side. So it's sitting in their queue. And we'll see where that goes. But I find the thought of how do we get that, like, I don't know the percentage of what that person will do on the museum side. I think it's going to be, I will say that the majority of library people are not always experienced in museums. It's pretty unique in terms of there's a library and museum kind of a job together. That's going to be an interesting. So I think it'll depend on how who we bring on with the department, how we can bring them on and train them and assist with different projects. But there's definitely will be roles with them in helping on that.
On the minutes of the previous meeting, that notes that I appointed a subcommittee to do an assessment of pre and post COVID activity levels. I have a draft of that report of the subcommittee.
Brian. Oh, Brian, here's one.
Oh.
Okay. What the report says is that, we're offering museum openings at about half of the level that we were pre-COVID. And there are other things that we are not getting done. And it, as noted in Brian's recent piece, our duty is to report to the city council. And so my intention would be we clean this up and the next meeting, if the committee approves in the meantime, the full commission, I mean, we go forth with a letter to the city council asking for additional staff so that we can have at least something like a 3/4 level of museum openings and make some moves into areas like the music and the art programs that we have essentially let go.
You know, in reading this again, I think the last paragraph might be even more specific by adding the words by increasing museum staffing. Because this is in no way reflection or criticism on you, Brian. You're doing a tremendous job, but you have such limited staff, really both at the library and at the museum. It's amazing what you have accomplished. So I think we're asking the council directly to say, we want more museum staffing. And I think both in your presentation on the path of history, you made a great presentation as well as the other staff. The city council is very cognizant of that there's a lot going on. And it's just amazing that's being done with the limit of staff that you have.
Yeah. And we've had some encouragement from the council to be more explicit about our needs.
So I would comment just for this, I think this would be a great discussion point for us to talk further and possibly agendize as when we get towards like the budget starts to be created for the city and like going into budget meetings and about what that would be. Cause I feel like, a ask for more staff is a pretty just open-ended, amorphous kind of a number, just in terms of more rather than we want 3 days a week or, what is the specific number? What is specifically going to be asked for on there? So I think that would be something to come back, at a future date, and whether that it's at the February meeting chair or however we do that, I think we can come back. And so we don't, because the topic isn't agendized in this, I think this falls under, comments here, but we can come back on February, agendize this and that as a subcommittee discussion, if that sounds good with you guys.
Good.
Do you need a motion?
No, we don't need.
Okay.
Because it's not agendized either. So it's,
Oh, okay. So we are going to see this in February?
we can put in the February. I think it's good. It'll be good to have the subcommittee report and discussion. We'll have a subcommittee report and discussion on the next step.
Because budget season's not far
Right.
beyond.
Right. And February is in our next official meeting where we can agendize and talk about this and ask for public comment on it as well.
Commissioner comments? Commissioner comment.
I'd like to meet this person. I don't think you're coming to our commission meeting for the reason.
Mhm.
For the moving forward on subcommittee. I think we have a lot to do in the year and we should be ready.
I agree. That's my comment.
As the clock ticks at 5 o'clock, I want to encourage everybody, if you have time, to join us at the library book sale that's going on from 5 to 7 tonight. And it's not only a book sale by the library, they're doing it in conjunction with Monterey History and Art that owns the Mayo O'Donnell Library. And also it's more of a holiday reception with some food and drink available. So it's right now at 5 o'clock at the library.
In which room?
It's
Community room.
community room in the downstairs.
Thanks. Further comments?
I have no comment.
Okay.
All right. Yes. We've done it. A motion to adjourn?
Just adjourn.
All
All right.